So, I'm out in Lincoln Park today with a lovely street tree that I wanted to talk a little bit about. We can go over some of the basics of winter tree identification with this tree as well. But first off, let's talk about this tree. Who is he, and what's it all about? This right here, this is Gymnocladus dioecious, the Kentucky coffee tree. The genus name there, Gymnocladus, means naked twig, because for long portions of the year, this tree will actually look exactly like this. It leaves out late and drops them early, so it really doesn't hold on to the leaves for that long. You can see a big aggregation of some leguminous fruits because Gymnocladus dioecious, the Kentucky coffee tree, is a member of, interestingly enough, not the coffee family, but the Fabaceae, the beans. So that's really cool. It's got beautiful bark, nice and good platy with some strong rectangular plating you can kind of see there. But what's most obvious about this tree and how you're going to be able to make the identification is I generally go for those bean pods up there, but we can talk about some of the other characteristics that this tree has here in a second when we get into some of our discussion of winter botany. We'll start with this. Oh yeah, I wanted to talk about that. A note about this tree's habitat. I believe in the wild this thing is pretty heavily endangered. I'll flash up a picture of the range map here in a moment. 1, 2, 3, go. There it is. Flash out the range map, but it lives in like rich alluvial woodlands, again along the margins of streams often. And as you can see, this one right here is doing something that it is quite notable for. It's suckering up from the roots, basically. And so in the wild, where this tree is still extant, you'll get massive colonies of Gymnocladus dioecious just hanging out on riverbanks and in bottomlands and stuff like that. So an awesome tree. It's got a really cool habitat preference, really cool kind of behavior to it with that suckering nature. It's apparently extremely drought tolerant, which is one of the reasons I would presume that it's such a popular street tree. But a quick note about these pods. You'll remember when I was talking about the honey locust in the last video, how I was talking about how those thorns were an adaptation of Pleistocene megafauna. That's called an evolutionary anachronism, okay? Which is when basically you've got an evolutionary pairing that is now in the extant time no longer functional because one of the partners has gone extinct, is my understanding of an evolutionary anachronism. But anyway, these pods right here are another example of an evolutionary anachronism, because what they're too tough to be chewed through by most of our extant mammal species. The seeds are too big, and they're also there's also like a toxin in the pulp of the seeds, or the pulp that surrounds the seeds. So it's not that great. Nothing can really disperse it. So now we just have these trees left, hanging around. It's theorized that indigenous people were quite vital to the expansion of this tree's range, given that the seeds are very hard and rock-like. So it's theorized that they might have been used in like games of chance by indigenous people, also in like ceremonial rituals and things of that nature. So a very cool tree with a very cool ethnobotanical, cool habitat, cool bark, cool fruits. But now let's get into the winter botany, and we'll talk about because winter botany often comes down to the twigs. So you got to familiarize yourself with the twig vocabulary. What we're looking at right here, we'll just use this as our example, our model. So at the apex, the far apex, the distal end, up at the tippy top, all words for the same thing, you get the terminal bud, which is a little bit weird in Gymnocladus. I might find another species to demonstrate what a terminal bud looks like properly, because they're a little bit sideways in Gymnocladus. They're not quite at the tippy top like I would want out of a good example of a terminal bud. So I can't show you that. Terminal buds will often be enclosed in bud scales to prevent against desiccation. But moving down from the terminal bud, you get the lateral bud. That nice big thing that looks like a button, more or less. You get the lateral bud, and then below the lateral bud, what's that, you're asking? That is the leaf scar, which is the point of attachment for last year's, the petiole of last year's growth, actually. So that big heart-shaped lump there, that's the leaf scar. And if we look at the interior of the leaf scar, it's kind of very difficult to see in this one. there will be small pores in there known as vascular bundles, which is the remnants of the actual circulatory tissue that we're running from the petiole to the branch, twig, whatever you want to call it. But so that's leaf scars, vascular bundles, lateral buds, terminal buds. I'm not aware of any specialized vocabulary that you throw around for bark other than like platy, furrows. You describe what it looks like, you know? Don't overcomplicate it, it's just tree bark. But yeah, so that's Gymnocladus dioecious, an awesome tree, awesome representative of the Fabaceae. Put it in your yard. It's supposed to be fairly easy to germinate. I grabbed some pods out of a park and I was just playing with them because I'll show you a picture of them in a little bit. They're like 4 inches long. The point being, they can germinate from seed very easily, and there are beautiful flowers on this tree, on the Gymnocladus. So put it in your dang yard. So there you go, some winter botany and a bit about a cool tree. So I've just dissected one of the Gymnocladus dioecious fruits, as you can see, coming in at about, oh, it looks like my estimation wasn't that bad, 4 inches long about. They're surrounded in the seeds, these of course. These might have a mold on the seed coat, it looks like. But as you can hear, listen. Sounds just like a rock because it's got a very, very hard seed coat on that. So if you wanted to germinate this, you would have to pour it in boiling water, or boiling water over the top of it and then let it sit for 24 hours. No way that seed coat's getting worn down. But yeah, surrounded by this green pulp. Looks kind of like a weird coin purse, I guess. But not too much to say about it. This pulp, the seeds and pods, I think, are edible if you roast them. Make sure you do roast them because, again, that aforementioned toxin in there, so don't eat them raw. Make sure they're roasted. I'm not a forager, I don't know. Gymnocladus dioecious fruits, they're pretty cool, I guess. An evolutionary anachronism, which is a term you don't hear that much. Anyways. So here's a twig that gives us a slightly better demonstration of what a terminal bud typically looks like. This is off of Fraxinus. So you can see you got your pair of opposite lateral buds right there in the center frame, and then following up to the apex there, you've got, enclosed by bud scales, the terminal bud of the plant. You can also see in the ash a bit more clearly than you could in the Gymnocladus. You can actually see the vascular bundle scarring, or the remnants of the vascular bundles in the leaf scar here, and I'll zoom in and show us that, because those vascular bundles are often very important and quite annoying, because a lot of the time you need a hand lens, but you see all those little pores. That's former circulatory tissue. I'm so shaky. Oh god, all that coffee. But you also notice on the twig, on the juvenile twigs, sometimes when you're handling winter botany, you'll notice these like little white stripes running up along them. I totally forgot to mention this in the Gymnocladus, that's why I'm tagging it on here. I'm really clever, aren't I? Oh god, this guy kind of looks like shit. Anyways, those little white bars, vertical bars, those are lenticels, okay? And I believe the functionality of a lenticel is it's kind of like it's very similar to a stomata, so it helps out in the gas exchange department, you know, taking in CO2 and releasing oxygen as it photosynthesizes. But I believe that's the functionality of a lenticel. Gonna have to do some reading. But there you go, lenticels, lateral buds, leaf scars, vascular bundles, terminal buds. That's winter botany in a nutshell, folks. Pay attention to the bark. And this right here, we'll talk about the bark. This being an ash tree, it's got pretty narrow furrows, I would say. Let's stride up and take a proper gander at this. So the furrowing, the little canyons, you know, those furrows, they're pretty narrow in the ashes, or at least in this ash. I think this is probably Fraxinus pennsylvanicus, but you see these not very wide here, but you'll notice a lot of times they get this kind of cool X mark going, and it almost like, and then the canyon kind of crosses over a little bit. You see that? And if you stare at this tree long enough, you'll start seeing it all over the place. And it's almost, I don't know, like maybe like a tessellation. Do you like geometry maybe? I personally hate it. But there's a good bunch of them, those little X's. So definitely dealing with a Fraxinus. This one looks like it's still okay, which is quite surprising given the prevalence of the emerald ash borer, Agrilis Planopennis, I think is the scientific name on that. But that's an awful insect. It's an invasive. Oh, wait a minute. Never mind. I thought I saw. Well, maybe it's not as okay as I thought. That kind of looks like that could be woodpecker damage, though. One of the signs of emerald ash borer infestations are you get what are called D-shaped exit holes on the tree, which is exactly what it sounds like. They're little holes that are in the shape of D's on the tree from when the larva, after it pupatates and becomes an adult beetle, shoots out of the tree to go spread more devastation. But the way it kills the tree is kind of interesting. It effectively girdles it. So after the adult emerald ash borer oviposits, the larva burrows in and starts eating up the xylem and phloem, okay? So it starts eating that circulatory tissue, and they work their way kind of running perpendicular to the circulatory tissue. So eventually, as they grow, their little path of destruction keeps on widening. But that's kind of a side note. That's how you can diagnose that on a fallen tree. You'll see that widening of the path, and then the D-shaped exit holes. That's beside the point. Where was I? So they eat the circulatory tissue, which is running vertically, usually in a perpendicular path, and when they eat through like that, they're basically cutting all the veins below a certain point. So up and above that point, the tree will die, dying down, because the tree can't, of course, send nutrients because its circulatory system is slashed. And that's the system that the emerald ash borer operates under. Nice little stamina flowers still floating around in here. On this, probably Fraxinus pennsylvanicus. Nice. So I was looking for these in the last video I shot out here, but as you can see, these little cup-like rings on this lichen here. There you go. Those are what are known as the apothecia, if I'm not mistaken, which are the reproductive structures for a lichen, or one type, I should say, of the reproductive structures that you can get in lichen, because I believe you can have apothecia, I think you can have isidia, and soridia, if I'm not mistaken, are all reproductive propagules or strategies that the lichens will employ. What a lichen is, by the way, is essentially, it's like, I've heard it get described in a number of different manners, which all kind of anthropomorphize a little bit. I've heard it described, I think my favorite one is like a fungus that has discovered agriculture, more or less, because what you've got going on within the tissues of the lichen is actually it's a sort of symbiosis between typically it's like an ascomycete fungus in generally the order Leccanorales. I think that's the right order. Leccanorales, and it's partnered up with a cyanobacteria or an algae, one of those two, and or sometimes both, and sometimes there's a yeast getting freaky in there too. So all those organisms kind of composite together, but like the mycobiont, the fungal component, the cells really wrap around tightly about the cells of the photobiont, the algae or the cyanobacteria. So it's almost like it's like kind of ensnaring the photobiont and kind of subjecting it to its mad mushroom whims. But there you go, some apothecia. This branch came off a nice sycamore here. Oh, a seagull. Oh yeah, seagulls aren't real because bird people are purists. Anyway. So here's another wonderful street tree that I've been seeing an awful lot of. This is looking like it's Celtis occidentalis, the eastern hackberry. The main reason that I'm making that call, it's actually on the basis of the bark here. You notice it a lot in hackberries, but they get this big spot, this big kind of bald spot, and then these little peels of bark over it. And if you look at the peels, you'll notice they almost look like sedimentary rock. They've just got like strata of tissue on them. Zoom in there so you can see it nicely. There you go. It's almost like an elm, but I've never seen an elm get, you know, quite that extreme with it. So those bald spots with the strata-like tissue there in the bark, often creating these big, deep furrows like that, and just get a load of this tree. It's almost when I first ran into hackberries, the thing I thought about them immediately was they just looked like they were like cast out of cement. Like that's a tough looking tree. The hackberries. Hackberries are kind of like, I see them in rudderell situations, you know, habitats that get a fair amount of disturbance. It's going to sound like I say that everything lives in riparian zones, but I see hackberries in riparian zones, you know, just another one to throw in there for that mix. But that's just because riparian zones are subject to a large degree of disturbance, you know, you got trees falling, you got water eroding the bank and all that, all kinds of disturbances happening. Anyways, Celtis occidentalis, great tree. Put it in your yard because it's got tons of wildlife value. The berries on this are very popular among a plethora of bird species, and I've also seen a couple species of gall on this tree, which means of course that insects rely upon it for, you know, home and food, and obviously birds rely on insects, and you know, you get that cool cascade effect, and it all starts at the base of the ecosystem. So make some birds and bugs happy, and why don't you plant a Celtis occidentalis. Family here is Cannabaceae, interestingly enough. The same family as your as cannabis pot. Yeah, pretty wild to think that that's related to this. Beautiful tree though. Yeah, I might not know my winter trees too good, but that's a wonderful grove of just some nice big matured cottonwoods. I love a cottonwood. People bash on the cottonwoods because they make it snow in the summer when they release all their little seed pods, but these are a really badass tree, especially when you find them in the dune systems, because the cottonwoods are what's notable about the cottonwoods, and there's a younger one right here, you can kind of see this one here. I'm not pointing at the right thing anymore. This one right down here, you can see it's starting to get that nice ridged bark, but while it's still young, kind of looks like an aspen. That's because aspens are in the same genus as cottonwoods, both members of Populus. You're probably thinking of Populus tremuloides, the quaking aspen. This is Populus deltoides, the eastern cottonwood. So both poplars, both aspen, whatever you want to call it Populus deltoides or Populus tremuloides, please. That's my spiel, you know that already. But cottonwoods are great trees because in the dune systems, you know, you're in shifting sand, right? So it's possible that you're going to lose a root or a branch is going to get buried. Well, the cottonwood doesn't give a shit about any of that, because when a root gets unburied or a branch gets buried, the cottonwood, I don't know how it does it. I haven't read up on it enough. But what the cottonwood will do is it'll just change it. Buries it, turns it into a root. Unburies it, turns it into a branch. It's incredible. So this is a really badass tree that catches a lot of flack because it annoys humans, but when you're viewing stuff through that a goldeneye! When you're viewing the world through that human-centric lens, you're gonna get inconvenienced by wonderful systems that have existed far beyond and above you. So, suck it up. It's cottonwood seeds. Have a good one, folks.